I've just picked a few remnants from the garden. Today is a fun and exciting day where we get to paint what's on the table. It's going to be fruity and florally, and mostly from my own garden. The setup you'll see in the beginning is really from years of gathering artificial flowers. Now, you know by now that I love artificial flowers and that I cannot create without them because I don't always have everything in season growing in my own garden. So, earlier this week, we had lots of fun, and someone brought me flowers from her garden. And because we've got this whole loose floral fruity theme going for the next 2 months, I wanted to create a little thank you card. So I'll prop up the camera and clean up this space here. I haven't painted outside on this table in, it feels like weeks, because it's been a little bit cold and then rainy and then windy. But right now there is heat and sunshine and birds and all kinds of lovely things, including this beautiful bouquet from a friend's garden. And I'm going to make her something special. Now, when I was recording this, I never thought that the camera was upside down. But that's all right, because I'm pretty sure you are used to looking over a shoulder to see what someone is creating. And this is going to be a really fast little practice. And I'm going to add it to my love stream for this week. So you can warm up as well and prepare for what is coming after this video. So let me just get my seat and sit down and take you through this little whimsical card cover. So I'm going to pick out a few flowers here that are delicate and pretty, and I'm going to loosen up with my watercolors. I'm going to use the grapefruit that I chopped up for this grapefruit iced tea as part of the floral arrangement. And then we will see how this pans out. I have no idea. Maybe just watercolor, maybe watercolor and pencil, you know, water soluble coloring pencils. We'll see. I'm aiming to have relaxed fun and invite you to paint along. Just a little practice. That piece of paper I've got in my hand, or watercolor paper, is 7.5 by 10 centimeters, and it's the perfect little card size, whether you're going to use it on its own or to stick on top of a cardboard card. You know, the craft card that we make little cards from. So some rose, opera rose here, and little bits of yellow, just a mark here that suggests a flower. It doesn't have to all be flowers. Here is something reddish, reddish pink. Not sure what that is. Might be a daisy. And how about we create the outlines of one of those roses? Now, I didn't like that color mix, so I'm going to go back into those pinky purples and get enough color on the brush, if I can get this hair off, get enough color on the brush to do a rough outline right there of a front facing rose. with a pale center. That's why I used whatever was left over on the brush to create that center, and then add some of that blue that was left over to dull it down a little bit. There is a little
And don't be
leafy
afraid to add
thing,
other colors in there.
a leaf doesn't just have to
And
be
I'll
green.
create more
Now there
leaf
isn't a lot of
structures
space
with
here
whatever is
for
left on that
slices
brush.
of grapefruit,
And just to
but I'm
balance
going to
out
draw
those greens a
one
little bit
large
more.
one here at the bottom to fill that whole bottom part. And again, using the oranges and the yellows to create the segments and leaving enough white space for the white parts of the grapefruit. Imagining a center there and working around with these triangular shapes and curving around for that round cut piece of grapefruit. Right. So I literally came from a class today and we were doing a fun theme for the Melbourne Cup. And that's why I'm a little bit dressed up today, sitting at this table. But I also know that later this afternoon, I want to go into the garden and just deadhead some of those plants and things that have either overgrown or have broken off by the wind. We had terrible winds this weekend. And I just want to go and check on the garden and see if everything is still okay. So all the spaces are basically filled in here. I'm balancing out a little bit of green on this side, and as a finishing touch, I'm basically outlining these leaves with little outlines that look like the leaves but that aren't the exact plant's leaves. They are random leaves and random shapes. On this one, I'm just creating some greenery over that red because I don't want the red gone, but it doesn't feel like it fits in as a red blob there. So here I'm taking a little bit extra red and concentrate, trying to just wisp in some of those petals. And the last part is where I'll bring in a little bit of blue for the background. Now, I don't want to overwork this and scrub on it too much. Just wherever I see a blank spot is where I'm going to put some blue and fill in. Be mindful that you don't fill blue in between the grapefruit segments because that is part of the inside of your grapefruit. So I don't know what I was doing there. I think I caught a droplet or something and just pushing the paint that was on there a little bit further instead of adding too much extra pigment. Well, not in that one corner, obviously, because that looks very bright to me. So I sprayed a little bit of water on that last corner to help move the paint because it's outside. Everything dries a little bit quicker. And I wanted that real flowy, watery look in this one corner. A handy tip is to make sure all four corners look different. That way it creates interest and almost a way for the eye to lead into what you were painting and lead out of the scene to give it some flow. Dash of extra color there in that grapefruit and a soft swoosh and blend. And I think we're done here. And of course, the pencils are on the table, so I better use them. And I don't want to overwork any areas. And remember, I'm working on top of dried surfaces and just adding a little bit of color into those areas where I feel my eye wants something to settle onto, especially on the petals where it's not clearly defined by color, so we can define it a little bit more with a pencil line. But remember, we are not drawing in all the details, we're just suggesting a few extra lines, a little shift in color, and a dot and a mark and a line here and there to lead the eye. Create a little bit of interest in your work. There, I think that should do it. This is just going to be a little gift to someone who always gives me the flowers that they bring and share, and always sending home a little snack for my daughter and a refreshing drink. And now I have to go get changed because I need to go work in the garden. Now, believe it or not, grapefruit tastes delicious with a little bit of ginger and lemon. Some new plants that need to go in the ground. A few old-time favorites. Cannot get enough of this geranium with the pink and red. It's so inspiring. And then my small little lemon tree is growing beautifully. Look at that. Can't believe I saved her from being thrown away and that she's recovered so well. Oh, and she smells just like neroli essential oil. Not to mention these double lilies. And there we have it. I've been working, I picked some remnants. Now you need to go get flowers and a grapefruit and meet me back in the studio so that we can paint together. Let me show you a sneak peek. Now, at this very moment, I didn't know what our final piece would look like, but I can tell you now that it turned out great. Right, this is what I've got set up. I just finished my little citrus iced tea. And this is what I brought with from the garden. Oops, one fell, let me get that. It was this little paper flower. Now I even like the back of it, so I'm going to put the back side facing in there and just come in with all the little remnants I picked up and brought out from the garden and just put them in here. Oh, don't hide the rose. Oh, okay, so this is just going to be a beautiful mess and I'll just have to live with it, but I can pick any of these up and rearrange them in any way I want, especially if I want something specific. I can just pick it up from this bundle here, this collection of beautiful remnants, and loosen up, create what I want to create and play, see how these things. This was one that was falling apart, and it's okay for life to fall apart. It's okay for our lives to fall apart. It's okay for things to not be permanently beautiful, because in that we strengthen and grow a little bit more. What is this? Oh, it must be one of the things from that little lemon tree of mine. Beautiful little petal there. All right. I hope that didn't make you dizzy. Okay. we are ready to just see what's on the table. I'm going to move this bowl of deliciousness to one side so we can look at the supplies we're going to use. I'm not going to go over the color wheel today, but you can have a clear vision of where I'm going. Now, if I'm going to paint this dahlia, it will be purple, orange, yellow, and green with a little bit of pink, right? If I decide to do the rose or the peony, yeah, this is a peony, then we'll do light pink, green, yellow, orange, and the dark pink. We can always bring in any leafy color we like. And I like the variation of something large that could be the focal point, like the biggest flower you have or the largest slice of whatever fruit you want to use. Then we have the medium things like this yellow flower, that there. Even this can be a medium element. This can be a medium element. And the lemon can be a medium-sized element. So this, on the other hand, is one of those little finer, delicate details we can add in later. Even these little orange blossoms can become the small parts of our work. These are also beautiful as small elements, and you can always splash a dot or two to simulate something small like this, because I don't want every aspect of what we're doing today to be difficult. So we're going to have one difficult thing, one intermediate thing, and then one really, really easy element. What we are working with, now I love essential oils, you know that, but we're not going to do an essential oil blend today. We're not going to paint any of those oils. I just put them there for decoration. As usual, I have my regular watercolor palette that I have shared before. All the colors in there are a really good combination to work with. The only thing I regret is not having a gold here where I've got that rose gold. And over time, I might replace this little one with a gold. But for now, I'm just going to tinker on with what is available in here. This is the Holcraft flat, and this is their number 1. There is a number 14 flat. There is a 10 flat, which I wish I had a 12, but I don't. So I'm just going to work with what I've got. There's a 6. These are all pointed rounds or just rounds. This is an 8, supposed to be bigger than that, but for me it feels like they are the same. Anyway, we also have a number 2 pointed round, and then this one is artist choice or something like that, a number 4. Here is that Princeton script liner. I cannot get enough of this liner. I absolutely love it. It's long and springy and works exactly the way I want it to. I do have a couple of coloring pencils here, and it's just so that we have a little something extra for those final details. The aim is to create a loose, fruity, floral effect and play with the things we have. I also have a pencil. I'm going to put that one away. We'll just keep this one, a water brush, and this Uniball broad eye. It's a really lovely pencil to outline with, if outlines are your thing. Now, every time I come to my table, I don't come with the intention of knowing exactly what I'm going to paint, and that is also what's going to happen today. You might have seen the finished painting as a thumbnail or an image online, but until I have finished it completely,
I do not know what the end result is going to look like unless I plan a lesson out exactly. But today is a love stream, something I'm going to share with you for the love of watercolor and creativity, so that you can see firsthand how to do this yourself. I'm also not going to go over my favorite paper with you. I'll keep that a little secret until later. Maybe in the workshop or so, I'll show you more on all the different papers that I love and some I don't love. For now, I'm going to work on this one and play. I don't want to get too serious here, but whatever's on the table, I could incorporate into my painting. Now, if you want to draw, you can draw very, very loosely. Now, under normal circumstances, I would go in with my pencil very lightly. Not that I mind my pencil showing through, but for today, I want to show you something new. I love drawing and creating outlines with my script liner. And I do that by gathering a little bit of dirty paint from my palette. So I'm going to wake up that palette with a little spritz of water. Now, spritzing that area and your paints lightly. I don't want you to soak your paint, because every time you soak your palette, you literally seep out the gum arabic, leaving your palette vulnerable to all kinds of things and to losing that watercolor ability to spread and move. Now, I'm also inspired by one of those flowers I've drawn before, and I'll just put that over there. Coming back to our dirty water, whatever you have on your palette, you can make more. So I just put a little bit of blue into that green and a little bit of orange into that green. And now we have a nice neutral. So somewhere on your palette, you might have a dirty puddle, and that's exactly what I want you to use. So without getting too technical, I'm going to loosely outline. Let's work with a peony, for example, because I'm liking the light pink with the grapefruit. And even though I'm inspired by all the other things, I think that's what I want to focus on, is the grapefruit. And these little flowers. Oh, look at this pretty little thing. We'll see. I might bring some of that in. But the grapefruit, I want to focus on that grapefruit. It is scrumptious. And I just had a glass of grapefruit and lemon iced tea that I made myself, and it was beautiful. All right, looking at our flower, let's draw a loose outline of that peony. If you skip any of the leaves, just go back and put it in. Don't overthink it. Don't create more petals or leaves where there aren't any. We're trying to simplify. And when we get to the center, we literally make some smaller squiggly floral lines there. Each of those will be painted as soon as we've done some of the other drawing. Now, I do want a little more petal popping out here. Little thing there. Let's turn that petal over so it has a little thing. All right, like that. All right, next, oh, I missed a couple of drops there. Well, you know what, if you make a mistake, then just go ahead and make that same mistake everywhere. That way you don't have to feel guilty about a little blob somewhere. Now we've got plenty of blobs. So this flower shape intrigues me to no end. It's little straight up filaments there, then the petals, then this little container that holds that all together, and then they all come together in this one stem. So let's see how we're going to do that. We'll do one or two of them as they look from the side, right? And really loosen up with, oh, just splashed some more. A little petal in the background, and remember they are nice and loose, and it doesn't really matter if they don't look exactly like the thing you started with, especially if you're a beginner. And that's exactly what I like about this technique, is you don't even have to know how to do it. And if it looks different than mine, then that means you created something unique. Now I want to make one more of those, but I want to make it a little bit wonky and maybe a bit more front facing. So let's focus on that one there. We'll give it that little look there, a little petal coming there, and a fourth one there. And you know what, every time I come and sit down and paint some of these things from my garden, I learn more and more about my plants. Look at that, I haven't seen that center temple where the pollen gets stuck on. Let's make one more. Let's make it, oh, a little bit too much paint. So it tucks underneath that one, and it has a squiggly little leafy thing there. I can just imagine what they looked like. Oh, and they still smell divine. What I meant to say there was what they looked like before we discovered them in the garden. Right, we've got 3 of those there. We've got the peony there. And now it's time for this grapefruit slice. And I'm going to take some of the distractions away here, so I don't have too many things to look at, that I just have that. And I already know I'm going to need a little bit of greenery here, so I can just as well use this oregano twig and put it there for inspiration and paint it since I'm busy. So that's a tall squiggly line. Oh, I didn't get the shape of that leaf right, and that's fine. Oh, it's a little bit blunter, right? So every time you notice something moved, shifted, or changed, you can go in and adjust your drawing. And this is basically the process I follow in my head. It's not always what you see on camera, because I do draw, but a lot of the time I'm already used to noticing the leaves and the petals and the things, and when I get to my table, I'm already ready to paint. And now that you are joining me, I'm going to slow down a little bit more, focus a bit more on the process and the step by step, so that you can learn alongside me. Now look at this interesting thing that happened here. Because I mixed up my grays as I painted, this one is kind of warm, can you see it? A warmish grey, and this here is a bluish gray. And it's exactly those types of color shifts that I'll be going over in detail as we progress. So next up, with that same color, grayish, bluish, orangey, greeny, neutral, I'm going to come in and paint these circles. They basically, where are we going to put them? Here. We'll do one there, and we'll work around that imaginary center there and create those segments. Remember, a grapefruit has a thicker white area between the rind and the fleshy parts, and we'll just paint over those twig branches but behind the leaves, and just imagine where they would possibly be. Now I'm gonna be naughty and bring in a little bit of a orangey thing there, because I think we're about ready to paint. And I just want, oh, that's a lot of orange there. Let's grab some yellow, soften that up a little bit. So that's just behind the flower there, that first loose blob accidental mistake. Even though I placed it there, I'm not going to fiddle, I'm not going to give it too much detail, I'm just going to leave it. Maybe even add a drop of water in here to soften that even more, and then come into here and come straight in with that bright, vibrant orange. Put it into those spots where the segments were drawn. I'm working from a puddle that had a little bit of pigment to grabbing more pigment and putting the pigment in, and alternating by getting more water and popping it into the pink and bringing that pink in here, not being afraid to let the colors flow. This is exactly what I want you to create, is color variation, saturation. Some need to be bright, others need to be dull, and that combination and balance between bright and dull and vibrant and muted is what's going to make your fruit and vegetables attractive, right? I don't want this in between to be too stark and white, so I'll add a little bit of color of whatever is surrounding that, and then I'll come back in with that rind and make it like a yellowy orange. First yellow and then back in that orange and touching it here and there. Now I also want to soften that a little bit by adding a splash of water. I'll go back in and grab yellow first and then dip it into the orange. And remember, my palette is slightly wet. It's not dripping wet, because I want whatever lands on my brush when I take it to be a controlled measure of how much pigment I want to place down there. And that's a lot of times part of the problem and why people struggle to get their watercolors to flow effortlessly. But we are solving those problems by learning new things while you're painting with me. Now I do want to bring some of these orangey pinks into that, not too much, just a little dot here and there, not to make it too bright, but to give us a darker edge as we move into these subtle soft pinks. Now that soft pink, this one's on along the for the ride by itself. And you can clearly see I'm holding my paper in my hand and directing that pigment as I'm painting. I'm not being too precise with it. And if I notice a spot that needs a little bit of color, or I didn't paint in a line, I just bring it in when I notice it. So here I want to create a puddle that is very, very thin with that opera rose there. And then go into that soft edge by placing the paint with a brush stroke. Whatever's on the paintbrush, I just want that to go onto those outer petals there. And while it is wet, and this is key, it must be still a little bit wet, we mix up a thicker consistency, a little bit thicker, in terms of, if the first layer was watery, this one would be more like tea or coffee. There's something in the water, but it's still very, very thin. And you'll see I don't color right up to the white edges and fill the whole thing in. I'm really placing this deeper, more saturated color into little corners so that it can bleed and blend with that watercolor that's already there. Just like that, just like that. All right, that peony is coming together. Now I'm noticing that this edge on the inside is even paler, but it's also a little bit orangey. Can you notice that? It's like it has a bit of warmth in there. It's not just pink. So again, I'll make sure that that puddle is thin, like stained water, and a little dip of the brush into that. Now I'm not sure about the color, so I'm just going to grab a test piece here and check it. You know, it's not bad, it just needs to be thinner. Yeah, I want it thinner. Okay, so that means our blend here needs more water. It's not thin enough. Again, keeping in mind there's a difference between a watercolor puddle that is watery and one that is a little bit more tea-like or has some coffee mixed into it. This one is definitely a thin stained water and not a coffee or tea water. Now right here I'm going to go back into the pink, and whatever puddle was left there, just darken it up a little bit more, because I want those deeper petals in there to go a little bit darker. And you'll see the peachy pink blends perfectly with this new version of the pink, creating some depth and movement. Here there's missing petals, but I don't care. I'm gonna just pretend like they are there, using my brush to cut into where I think they could have been. Not really giving all the details to the pencil lines or the drawing lines, but using some of my own initiative and imagination to create petals and detail in petals that were not drawn before. All right, now I'm going to go a little bit thicker, a little bit more intense, and this time it can be like stained tea water or strong coffee. And I'm going to come in here on that petal edge. That side there is starting to dry already, and you'll see it softens and bleeds, and that's exactly what I want. But because this blend is thicker paint or more pigmented. It doesn't bleed into that too much. And that's one of those tricks that you'll learn as we go along in this fruit and floral watercolor series. All right, a little more concentrated, this time working with the consistency of between milk and cream, and I'm adding more pronounced smaller petals in there. Where are you going? And refining those details, maybe a little tip here and there on some of those while they're still wet to bring in accents or details. And play, see, there was that other blob, and if I don't like it, I can just put more saturated color on it. And if there's something you don't like, just rinse your brush off, dab off some of that liquid, and go back in and soften it with a soft stroke. We don't want any of this to feel too difficult or strenuous. Now, holding these two together, you can clearly see where I got my reference from. You can clearly see where I got my colors from, but I didn't copy this exactly. And that is part of the fun, is you get to reimagine all the florals and things you have. Now, working with a little thing like this that has white and yellow and green can feel intimidating with a big brush, but I'm going to stay with this number 10 round and come in with a pale yellow. Now, be mindful that you don't go bright and then, you know, feel disappointed with your yellow. So what I'm doing here is I am mixing my yellow, then I'm taking some of that gray I mixed up before and I'm making my yellow dirty. Adding a little more water because I don't want it to scream yellow. I want it to look white. So I'm adding a little bit of yellow at the bottoms of each of these because I've got the color on my brush. I'm going to rinse the brush, dab some of that water off, and pull some of the color into those leaves or petals. Yeah, these are petals. All right, then leave it as is. Don't do anything. Go into your yellow ochre color, that darker, deeper yellow, and darken up these center bits. I'm just gonna go in with those little dots of detail there. A little bit of detail, not too much. And then with whatever's left on my brush, just bring in a little swoosh of color there at the base. Okay, time to leave that alone and mix up a little bit of that lime green. So lime green, the way I see it, is this light green with a little bit of yellow. So I'm just using the puddle I already have and mixed in some of that light green coming into that puddle, or creating a puddle there that you can either leave as is, or like I like to do is lift off some of the intensity. So parts of that will remain bright and airy and some parts will be lifted. Right, done with that one. Now we're going to do that oregano leaf and beautiful greens there. The green apatite that I've got in my palette. I'm going to bring in paint filled into my brush onto dry paper, little brush marks, and let it do what it wants to do. that one you can use like a stamp, marks here and there. And when it bleeds into another color on your palette, just go with it. Everything doesn't have to be perfect and the same tone and the same color and the same mixture. There's color variation in this whole thing, and even if you look at individual leaves, there are color variation in each of them. So work with it. Work with what you have. Don't over mix, don't over exert yourself to try and get it perfect. There is no such thing as perfect. Even nature is, every time this plant is pushing out a new leaf, it is striving to be better and better and better. And with small micro movements and intentions, it's getting there systematically. And because we are not painting real botanical studies, we get to choose what we want that to look like. Now I'm intensifying parts of that by literally grabbing color on my brush, and I already know that that is going to be a beautiful, deep, intense green, and I love that pop of additional color right there, and using that as a final piece. So what's on my brush here, I'll work in there, maybe thin it down with some of that dirty color there, and bring in some shadowy parts for interest and variation. Going back into that green, that light green I have. You see, I don't like that, so let's just lift some of it out. It's just too much. It's too bright for me for this composition. So I'll put it on the palette and mute it a little bit with my other green. All right, filling in some of the spaces that didn't have any color or that felt like it needed a little something. And now I can assess, where do I want more detail? Will it be necessary for the overall look of this painting? And can I be happy with what I created here? Now I'm feeling a little bit like I need more orange, but I don't want to put another slice of grapefruit here. So we have two choices. We can either put more of the grapefruit on the other side of the peony, or we can do the background with a little bit of orange. So let's take the orange I have on there and mix it in with a little bit of pink. That is one of my favorite combinations, that pinkish orange. And in that corner, put some of that down straight from the brush. Whatever you picked up there, put it in that corner. A little bit there. I'm not going to put some there just yet. So now I'm dipping my brush into the water and I'm moving that pigment into the background, rinsing more and more of it off as I go around so I can soften this whole look here. Once I reach this area, I'm going to go in with a little bit of that green and desaturate the background, going in behind all the things that I just painted. A little bit of orange, a little bit of dirty orange. Make it dirty with the greens you used. And now soften that up. Keep that edge wet so that that paint will move. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit of yellow. I said a little bit, Tanya, a little bit. So I have a lot of yellow there that I can steal from and move. And we'll do like a little dirty yellowy green around these ones. And now I can really just grab some of that dirty water and move it over this background. Just like that. We'll skip over the details. Oh, again, too much, but that's all right. We're working with watercolor. We can literally soften that up with a little extra water. So here, just behind that watermelon, not watermelon, that grapefruit, I'm going to put in a little bit of intense pink right there and wash this color out all the way into here and almost wash it out to nothing. But I don't want to leave the page blank or white or without any color. So I'm grabbing whatever's left over on my palette, very, very thin. This is even thinner than dirty water. It's like stained water. Moving it, pushing it in that direction and going in with those leftover colors just to dirty up the page a little bit. Oh, I'm loving how this turned out. I'm enjoying the process. And in a way, I was really making a mess and having fun with that mess. So you'll see I darkened up this one corner with a bit of green. And I'm going to go in with that yellow ochre in this corner. And while it's still wet, just scrub in a little bit of it. Just the tiniest amount. That way, all four of your corners are different. They have character. They have movement. Enough of everything is showing. And I think all that's left to do is maybe bring in a little green thing there. A little green something. Nobody knows what it is. It's just there. It exists. And another leafy whatever. Leave it to the imagination to fill in the gaps. There we go. I'm going to leave it. I'm happy. I'm going to let it dry and then come back and photograph it for you. And here is that close-up. Look at that. Loose and free. We've got our large element, our medium, and small bits. And all those little mistakes we made in between. Everything is there. Living and having their own little experience. Now, I'm really happy with how this turned out, and I'm glad that I had that warm-up session earlier today. Looking at the results I got here, I'm thinking that you will have similar results because you followed through step by step, and I would love to see what you created. So don't be shy. Go ahead and share a photo.